Recently, there was a major tournament on MTG Arena for the Hobbit. It was the Arena Direct event where a successful run netted you a collector booster box of the set, which at the time of the event was worth roughly $825, and the entry fee was a correspondingly high $40 worth of gems. And as a result, it was a very high roll tournament, very swingy, and I decided that unlike most of these tournaments where I sit them out because I don't really care about the sealed or the prize or whatever, I would actually participate in this one and I would showcase what that event was like from my perspective. Now, I had certain goals, I had certain aspirations, and here's how I was going to approach the event. First, I had set aside $200 for entry fees, which, based on MTG Arena's economy, would net me 5 entry fees. I also had enough gems saved up to do a 6th entry fee, so I basically had 6 runs with which to operate for my video. I had a cool video idea. I was going to say, I spent $200 on MTG Arena Direct runs. Here's how it went. Something along those lines. So I already had a set, kind of a side amount of money. I had a set goal. I had those sorts of runs lined up, so I wasn't going to just be pressing the button endlessly to just play without thinking because, okay, sure, it's like such a high prize. I just want to get a chance of winning the thing. I'm just going to play over and over and over. I kind of had already set that aside. So I had 3 goals for the event. The first goal was to track everything. I had made a spreadsheet on Excel. I was going to use that to track what my thoughts were going into the deck build, what my actual deck build was, what a link to my sealed pool so I could reference it later. And then every game, whether I won or I lost, I was going to enter information in about what the game was like so I could learn from it and improve for the future, not only in this set, but also just like learning in general, like, okay, maybe I misbuilt this sealed pool. Maybe I did this a little bit differently. Maybe I should have gone more greedy. Maybe I should have gone less greedy with this build. Those sorts of things. I wanted to track everything. This was a goal that no matter what, I was going to be able to achieve. And that was pretty nice for me because it meant that it was not only, it was a goal because I still wanted to make sure I did it. I didn't just want to click into the event, play without thinking. But it was a sort of goal that was going to help me stay focused. It was going to help me stay on target. And if I was ever in a point where, oh, I don't really want to track my data for this one, that would be a good indication that I was not in the right headspace to be doing my absolute best. Speaking of doing my absolute best, before I started the event, I crafted every single rare and mythic in the set because whenever you get packed as a reward, those can get you more gems if you craft every rare and mythic in the set. Just optimizing those little things helped me get in the zone. When I was playing my games, I was playing on full control. I didn't want to give up any information. I wanted to focus to my absolute utmost. I wanted to be playing my absolute best, and that led into my second goal, which is I wanted to have a 66% win rate in the event. Now, 66% is a high number. If you were playing on the Pro Tour, that would be an unattainably high number. But on Arena Direct events, you can see kind of the stats of some of the best players, and some of the best players can even approach 70%. And I felt like I was good enough if I played with 100% focus to get to that 66% number. It seemed very doable to me, and it was the goal that I set for myself. And if I didn't reach it, well, then maybe I could have to be like, okay, maybe I can try to improve. I can find somebody to help me out with sealed builds or something like that. But it was the goal I had set for myself, 66% win rate. And again, this is independent of winning the event. These goals are, the first goal, always attainable. Second goal, I felt like it was very within striking distance for my skill level. And then my third goal was I did want to win a box with one of my 6 runs, but that goal is kind of the hardest to achieve because it's so swingy, even with a very high win percentage like 66%, if that is what I'm actually at, and I'm able to achieve that goal. Getting a box on 6 runs, which maybe you get a little bit more because you get some of your entry fee back if you don't get all the way to the 7 wins. That was still a very difficult goal potentially because it can be very swingy, but I did have that as one of my goals. So I had 3 goals going into the event. I had kind of 6 runs to work with. I was going to make that cool video, as I already mentioned, and the event did not go the way I anticipated at all. And so in this video, I'm going to be covering what actually happened, how all of those goals went, how everything went in the event, because it ended up being a truly glorious tournament for me. So with all these goals in mind, I kicked off my event and quickly learned what would turn out to be a truth of the format. Black-red is the deck to play, black-red is the deck to beat. It's a black-red world, and all of the decks are just living in that world. My first event, I built a black-red deck, and then all 4 of my rounds I played against black-red. And it felt like my losses, there wasn't anything I could do, but by tracking and learning and trying to improve every single game, trying to win even when it was like, okay, maybe I won't get the box on this run, that really helped me stay focused, and I learned that important lesson right off the bat, that you are going to face black-red decks a lot, you are going to build black-red decks a lot, and that's just going to be a matchup that you have to get very familiar with, the black-red aggro mid-range kind of matchup. And so kind of making deck building decisions with that in mind would end up being somewhat important down the line. My next round, my next attempt, I also built a black-red deck. I also faced 2 black-red decks, but I also faced 2 black-green decks, which was another defining force of the meta. I think that the key takeaway from this run for me is that I felt really proud of myself for my 2-2 finish, because I started 0-1, and then in my second game, I could have easily gone 0-2, but I think I played really, really well to play around a large bear that my opponent may or may not have had in their hand at the time. They ended up playing one a couple turns later, so I think they had it in their hand. And if I don't play around the large bear, I swing and basically finish off my opponent. I get them to like 1 life or something. They're almost certainly going to die the following turn. But if I do make that play and they have exactly the large bear, I lose. I felt like my opponent was trying to incentivize me into attacking, trying to force, like, get this winning situation for themselves. And so I played around the large bear. It ended up leading to a very like finicky situation where I like took a very winning position and almost lost as a result. But I think I would have lost guaranteed if I hadn't played around the bear, and then I ended up winning that game. And that was really good for my mental confidence, because I had built all these kind of tools into my arsenal to help me play my best. I had a hypergeometric calculator off on the side to help me like make key mulligan decisions if I needed to just do some extra math. And I had every single card that I was trying to play around on a spreadsheet as well, that I could reference at any time with all the instants and big haste creatures like the large bear, that sort of thing. And I think by putting all of my extra thought into the plays instead of playing on autopilot, I was able to make a better play around the large bear, and win a game that I would have almost certainly lost. And that made me feel really good, because as my goal was to get that 66% win rate, a 2-2 finish is a lot better than an 0-2 finish as far as that goes. So 2 runs in, I was learning, okay, black-red's the place to be. I was learning certain cards that I liked, certain cards that I didn't like, and I was trying to just generally improve, and every single win counts when you have a win percentage goal, and that really helped motivate me to continue going forward. My third run turned out to be a turning point for the entire tournament. I built a blue-black deck because I had 2 copies of the boat, even though blue-black is an off-meta strategy, and this was the first time that I won my first round. Losing the first round feels like almost like a death sentence for the run. You have like no room for error, no more margin. You still play your best. You still want to get to that high win rate that you strive for, but winning your first round is a whole different feeling, a whole different ball game, and I felt really good about my deck. It felt like an easier pace too, because my opponent just wasn't maybe the best player, and it felt like I was just able to kind of cruise to a victory, and having a nice smooth victory really set the tone for this run. I was able to pick up a few more wins using my just good card quality, my good counter magic, and then after a 5-0 start, I had one of those situations where mental toughness really plays a role. I had to mulligan my first hand, I had to mulligan my second hand, and I had the most dream, like best possible 5-card hand you could imagine, where I had the Night Howl Pursuer into the Desolation Prowler, and I was able to win a game that felt really, really challenging psychologically. Clicking that mulligan to 5 button never feels good, especially when you're 5-0 in these big events, but I was able to get the victory in a very, very tough situation, and that's how these runs end up going. You have to get lucky in the key situations, and I was able to do just that. I also had at that 5-0 spot. Now that I'm 6-0, I'm feeling like, okay, I'm in a really good spot to win this box, and then I lose that next round. It's really crushing. You're like, oh my gosh, I'm right on the precipice. I don't want to go 6-2 after this great start, but that's how it goes sometimes. And then in the final game, I felt like I played brilliantly. I played slow. I played conservative. My opponent did very little for the early turns, and so I was worried that I had been playing too conservative. But I feel like my opponent had removal spells, and I was just not crewing up my boat, not giving them the opportunity to use their removal spells, and I was able to win a very long, drawn-out game where I was able to get very ahead because they did nothing early, but it was still a long, drawn-out game because I wasn't applying the most pressure, and eventually I had a counterspell on a key crude bent blade and was able to emerge victorious and win the box, which was an absolutely fantastic feeling. That was one goal knocked out of the park completely. It was a really good feeling. Getting a nice 7-1 run after going 2-2 a couple times is definitely a distribution that is more favorable for the player. And that's one of the things, is like, you can have a 66% win rate and just go like 4-2 every time, and that's 66%, and that's not going to win you a box ever. But if you can go 7-1 a couple of times, then you end up in a spot where you're like, okay, I'm 11 wins, 5 losses. That's still a 66% win rate, actually a little bit higher than 66% wins. But 3 runs in, I have my win rate, I've reached the box goal, and this is where I started to reflect on the whole event and be like, okay, well, I've kind of already, I'm like free rolling now, almost. I'm halfway through my entry fees that I was kind of set. And this is a sort of thing where you need to be careful. It can be equally difficult sometimes to be like, oh, I'm winning, I'll just keep playing, I'll keep winning. It can be just as difficult to be like, oh, I'm losing, winning is right around the corner. And so it's an important psychological hurdle. And so I defined a new rule for myself, which is I had already put in my $200 in entry fees. I was going to then, for every box that I won, I decided that I would be willing to invest another $100 in entry fees because the boxes are worth roughly $800 at this time. And I was like, okay, playing this event is enjoyable. I can keep kind of making this video concept about it. But I have a new kind of thing where if I win a box, I can add an extra $100 of entry fees. And I decided that I was going to end my first day of the tournament with a victory, keep that psychological mindset in my head, and be really, really pleased with myself. So I played my first day of the event, and this was technically the event started on a Friday, and this was like the Saturday. I wasn't able to play on the first day of the event technically, but my first day of the event, I finished the day with a box. I had achieved all of my goals so far. I had the win rate, I had the tracking, I had the trophy, the box. And the next day was going to be a brand new chance to kind of continue to seize this opportunity for potentially a very lucrative event. So that's how it's going to continue for the next day. Day 2 of the Arena Direct event for me started with a build that I think I spent an hour and a half on. I was just at a loss. I wasn't 100% sure whether I should be playing a red-white deck or a red-black deck, or whether I should be playing some combination of splashes or things of that nature. I spent a really long time on this build, and then I ended up going 2-2, which is like, okay, you spent all this time, you only went 2-2, but my mindset was I wanted to eke every little bit of value out of every single build that I could. I wasn't trying to spam builds. I wasn't trying to be like, oh, if I technically have this win rate, this is my hourly rate playing. No, I wanted to have the highest win rate possible with every single event. Like these were like my event at like a limited championship qualifier or something like this. Okay, I only have one shot, one opportunity. This is the only build I'm ever getting. I just want to make sure that I used every single resource at my disposal. I was just deep in the tank, and this is one of the few builds where I switched builds after like round 1. I think maybe after round 2, I played 2 rounds with one version of the deck, and then I swapped to a red-white deck and used that version of the deck for the next couple of rounds. And I think that was a big moment for me because it was my first time playing white in this entire tournament, and it taught me a lot about some of the white cards that maybe were overperformers, maybe white cards that I didn't really care about, and getting that experience with the cards firsthand was really valuable to me. Even though it was a 2-2 run, I still felt like I was playing pretty well, and even though I had to rebuild my deck, it felt like my loss that I lost was not due to to the build in particular that I had, and it was more so just like, okay, this was a little bit of an unfortunate run. I would have lost with either version of the deck. And so really kind of interesting for my mindset, because I felt like I got a lot of like entertainment value out of this one, because I spent so long building it. I spent so long like battling it out, and I still went 2-2. So I was like, okay, not the best win rate, but it's better than going 0-2, especially because I started with a loss again, and I was just going to keep on going with my next run. My next pool number 5, was the first pool where I played green cards. So again, a day of firsts. I'm learning, I'm trying to improve, but I played a red-green deck that got greedy and tried to splash blue and black, and the deck had so much power level in it. It was really, really strong, and I was loving life. And then you just come up against those situations where in order to win the box, you have to kind of have everything go smoothly. And I faced those sorts of situations where things just don't line up well. Like your opponent uses gnashing teeth and kills like 3 of your creatures or something of that nature. And then they like use their like down to Goblin Town and just take your like key card. And then you draw your 6th land and it's one of your tap lands and everything goes wrong. And then you just lose a game to flooding out and you're like, okay, this is one of those ones where it felt like the deck was really strong and it just didn't quite have like the fortune on its side. I like to think about luck in Magic in several ways. Sometimes you can have a really good deck and maybe get a little bit less lucky in the games. Sometimes you can have really medium deck and get very lucky in the games, and sometimes you have both. And oftentimes to win the box, to go 7-1 or better, you kind of need to have both. And so this deck, whenever I lose these sorts of games to variance where it's like, okay, I just drew every land in my deck, there was nothing I could do, I just like to feel grateful that I had that happen after I had racked up some wins. And so I was able to get a nice 5-2 result with this deck, helping me in my goal towards my 66% win rate. And so that's a really nice thing as well, where any run that I had that got me to 4 wins or better was helping me in my secondary goal, which wasn't just to win boxes, but was to have this high win rate that made me feel like, okay, I'm playing at a high level. I'm playing as one of maybe the better players in this event in terms of win rate, and I'm actually really focused and doing well and locked in and all of that stuff. And so that's one of the reasons why I had that secondary goal, was because a run like this, depending on your mindset, can be very demoralizing. You can be like, oh my gosh, how many times am I going to get all these rares and all this fixing and have this really cool deck? But it still helps you achieve your goals. And over the course of 5 events so far, of the maybe initial 6 that I was planning on playing, I had a pretty solid win rate. I had won a box. I had been keeping track of all my data. I had been building well. I'd been playing well, and I was feeling really, really good about the event. Run number 6 was one of the most challenging psychologically for me. For starters, I opened up a pool that had no rares that I wanted in my color combination. I built a black-red deck. It was totally solid, and it actually was really nice to have 4 copies of Crude Bent Blade, which was an all-star performer, but it did feel a little demoralizing to go from a run with so many good rares to a deck that did not have a lot of rares to work with at all. That was a pretty big downside. It was like just psychologically you have to overcome that. And what I was thinking to myself was, okay, I'm just going to be aggressive. I'm going to be trying to build, like, play my absolute best. And even if this run can't make it all the way to the trophy, I'm still going to be focused up because I do have these other goals. And this deck can definitely get me some number of wins and can definitely end up being the sort of one that gets me some gems back or helps me continue the fight for a future run. It was my 6th run, and I still did really value having a really good win rate and things like that. This was like the first 6 runs that I had initially kind of allotted for myself, and so I was going to still be battling and trying my best. I then lost a game for one of my first losses. I started off 3-0. That was really nice, but I lost a game where I felt like I maybe could have made decisions differently and won the game. And it doesn't necessarily mean that I made wrong decisions. It just means that if I had played the game in a different way, I would have potentially been able to win. And those are an important distinction because sometimes it's just a judgment call. You're like, okay, I don't think I can beat my opponent's late game. That happened to be the decision I was making. I didn't think I could beat their late game because they had like 3 giant flyers and my deck had very little removal in it. It had like 1 removal spell. I used my removal spell maybe too aggressively on one of their small creatures when I knew they had a big creature coming because I was hoping I could finish the game before that happened, maybe draw 1 more interaction spell to finish the game. It didn't end up materializing. It didn't end up going that way, and I lost that round. But then I rattled off 3 more wins in a row, so I was still battling for the trophy, and that's where everything kind of wheels fell off again. You have one of those games where, like, your Gundabad Opportunist flips the only card in your deck that you can't cast. It flips your only 6-drop in a situation where you play it on turn 4 and have the land to play your 5-drop. And then you end up, like, killing their, like, 2-drop creature, their Owen, and then they have a secondary one, and that doesn't feel very good either. And then they play like their mythic rare, and you're just like, well, my deck doesn't even have any rares. This is so unfortunate. And I ended up going 6-2, and this was it's a very tough feeling when you're like, oh my gosh, I was on the precipice. Both of the games I lost felt pretty brutal. This last one especially felt like, oh, everything that went wrong could have gone wrong, did go wrong. I felt like I was in a good spot. And those are the ones where it's really important to bounce back psychologically and really try to focus up and play your best in the future, which isn't always easy to do. So really tough run on this one, but I felt like my win percentage was exactly where I wanted to be. I had a very good win percentage through these first 6 events. At this point, after my 6 runs, I was 24-11, which meant I had a 68.5% win rate, and I had won a box, and so I felt really, really pleased with that, even though I was coming off of a somewhat devastating loss in the finals of an event where my deck felt like it was very medium. And so those sorts of things felt like pretty good. It was good to have this expectation, this level setting, but this was ended up being a day where I kept playing, I kept going, I kept facing things off. And my very next run, I went 0-2. I don't think it was actually a case of me losing focus and starting to play worse. I actually think that this was just one of those cases where I kept opening hands, or like I played the games and it was just like happened to be that 2 games in a row, things really didn't go my way. So like in my first game, I was like 1 life point away from stabilizing, but then they had like a gigantic big bear as a rare that just like came in and like put too much pressure on me. And then like my second game, I had like a hand that had like 2 5-drops and a 3-drop, and then drew like no spells that I could cast. And like, that's just going to happen some percentage of the time. You have like a very cheap deck. You build your deck with the optimism of, okay, if I don't have a 2-drop or 1-drop in my opening hand, I have good opportunities to draw something that I can cast. But it still felt like one of those situations where taking a little bit of a step back and being like, okay, I had this really close run, and then I went 0-2 with my very next deck. That's got to be something that I really kind of focus on and be like, okay, take a little step back, be careful, be calm. Like, as I wrote in my post-game notes, my deck seemed all right. Game 1, I made good plays, but then had 1 less life point than I needed. Game 2, I drew very badly. But like, it was just like an 0-2 run. And 0-2 runs also feel really bad because they also really tank me on my win percentage battle as well. But it's still the sort of thing where you play your best, you do what you can, and you move on to the next run. And that's why you have to be willing to kind of not embrace the swings, but be willing to accept that the swings are going to happen. Okay, so my 8th run, I went for another greedy build. I didn't do a ton of greedy builds, but this one felt pretty interesting. I had like kind of a red-black base, but I was splashing like heavy into white, and I was splashing a green card, and I had like a pretty good late game overall where I could just keep presenting threats to my opponent because the removal in this set is very good. And again, I lost the first round, which is always kind of a blow. You're like, okay, I lost the first round. Now I'm just kind of scrapping to see how far I can get because you don't want to go 0-2, especially going back-to-back 0-2 would have been really, really bad. Psychologically speaking, I think. But I was able to battle, and the loss was super brutal too, because it's like I have a Thror's map, they don't, we're both top decking, and I lose the game anyway. Those games happen, but you have to be willing to accept that those games happen, but it still didn't feel great. I was able to then win a couple of games back to back, even though in my second win, I messed up my Mythic Rare Thorin's ability, because I didn't realize you have to actually move the equipment over for it to trigger the Thorin. I thought like, okay, I'm just going to keep it equipped to the same creature. Nope, that doesn't work. That was another one where you're like, okay, when you make a mistake in game, you have to be willing to just accept that. Okay, I made a mistake. How can I win from where I'm at now? Just like if I came to the board from a fresh perspective, having not seen the mistake, how would I win? And so I was able to win that game. And then I lost a game to them just having it all and having a couple of Gandalfs and discard spells for my recursion, that sort of thing. It's how it goes sometimes, but a 2-2 battle back after a like rough 0-2, still a good spot to be in terms of like not going 0-2 back to back. Run 9 was spectacular, quite honestly. Run 9, I had the classic black-red deck. I was splashing green for a Chief Wargs company, which ended up being so essential to me. And I ended up playing some of the most intense games I possibly could. And as an added bonus, my father was watching. He wanted to like enjoy the process because I went to go see him for dinner or something. And he does not really know how Magic works. I don't think he's ever watched me play, really. So I was like, as I was saying, I sometimes play worse when I'm commentating, and I definitely think I made a couple of slight mistakes as I was explaining to him how the game functioned. But I had just a really sweet black-red deck. I made some tweaks over the course of the event. I did like end up cutting like a Snow Slope Hunter for like another Rage into the Valley, and I like made some minor adjustments there. But this run ended up just being like a really, really interesting one. I lost my third round to a copy of The Eagles Are Coming, which I could just never, ever beat in a million years in that situation. And then like I won a couple of games with my Chief Wargs company, but just like almost single-handedly. In round 6, I ended up getting to play the Desolation of Smog into Smog, which was just like insanely good for me. And then in round 7, which is like I was 5-1, I feel like my deck is good. I feel like it's got a chance. I was stuck on only swamps for the longest time in the game, and on the final possible turn, drew the mountain to play my Owen with haste, equip it with a bunch of things, and swing for the win in a game where it was like, oh my gosh, I just keep drawing all my double red cards. I've had this only swamps for so long. Then in the final game, I missed my third land drop. I was on the play, I had Desolation Prowler on turn 2, and then on turn 3, I missed my land drop, but I found an old Thrush, which let me get a forest, and I was like, okay, I'm just going to jam Chief Wargs Company and hope it's good enough. They never found a kill spell. I was able to play a Crude Bent Blade and a Night Howl Pursuer eventually, and I was able to secure the win, and they went AFK once I had locked it up, and I was like, oh my gosh, just sitting there like with the intensity of like, oh my gosh, I think I just won my second box. And I ended up wrapping up the day after winning this one. Again, 2 days in, 2 boxes. This one took me a lot more runs, but I did have that very close defeat. And again, after 2 days, I was feeling really good about my tournament. I was like, okay, I've played 9 runs now, which is a few more runs than I initially anticipated, but I've won 2 boxes. So I'm kind of free rolling. Again, I'm just going to keep adding $100 a day to keep myself kind of accountable and make sure I'm still focused and playing well, I think. Or just generally on that track, as long as my mindset is in a good spot. And now that I've won 2 boxes, it feels like almost impossible for me to end up in a spot where I feel like the event was a failure. And this is just 2 days into the event, and I'm feeling really, really good about things. They initially said that this event could run for as many as like, I think 10 days or something like that, or from one Friday to through the next Friday through the next Sunday. So I think 10 days, yeah, because or maybe like 9 days or something of that nature. Really, really crazy event. And I was feeling really good about how I was pacing myself, how I was playing. At this point, 9 runs in, I had a 67.3% win rate. I'd won 2 boxes. I was tracking everything, so I was just flying colors on all of my metrics. Feeling really good about that. 2 days into the event, 2 boxes, really, really good success. Day 3 of the tournament was really, really cool. My first run, though, not so much. My 10th attempt of the tournament, it felt like a significant number. I was now into double-digit attempts, and I ended up just having like pretty run-of-the-mill red-black deck, splashing a little bit of white. Nothing crazy, but I did feel like I was playing well, even though I only went 2-2. My opponent just kind of had it all with their rares in like the last game, and that's just how it goes sometimes. You can't answer their bothersome noisemaker, you lose games like that, but I felt like I was playing well, and I was off to a good start, at least psychologically speaking. Round 11 was another really, really cool deck. I didn't have like any rares to work with. I had an Azog Moria's Ruin in my deck. That was it. And it ended up being pretty okay, but it's not the like most overwhelmingly good rare. You're like destroying your own army to get a new one, so it's like a 3-mana 1/3 that draws a card. Or if you have some equipment synergies, you can sometimes do something like equip my creature, destroy my creature, you get more stats than the creature was technically worth. That can be pretty okay. But it's not like a crazy good rare. And I was in a spot where it's like, okay, my whole focus of this deck is being aggressive. I have 7 2-drop creatures. I have 2 2-drop removal spells. I'm never going to be missing my 2-drop, hopefully. And I can just hopefully use that to leverage and always be on the front foot. And then my cards will line up very well as a result. And that's kind of how it played out in many cases. I had 2 bothersome noisemakers were amazing. I had like my little secret tech card. I like the well-worn spatula because the 2 points of life were really valuable in games you were on the draw sometimes. And with the noisemaker, sometimes you can get some like real stats out of the card as well. You get a 1/1 worth of stats when you play that while you have a noisemaker in play. That definitely enhances the card a bit. But I was able to win my first couple of games before losing like a tight third game. It was one of those ones where it was like, man, maybe I could have won this game if I had played it differently. But like at the time, it was like, okay, these kind of plays make very good intuitive sense. And then I had a couple of more curve out games. I was able to win like one of those intense sweat games where it's like my opponent probably has like 20% chance to win because they need to top deck a removal spell. And like if they do, they win. If they don't, they lose. So I kind of had the sweat on that one. And then like I had like a game where my opponent was like playing really aggressively, and the life gain cards that I had were really, really helpful, like my Golem and my well-worn spatula. At this point I'm like 5-1, and I had like another really hard fought game, and I played down to Goblin Town to kill my opponent's like Dancing with Bears card or whatever it's called, like the 5-mana enchantment that just makes a bunch of bears. There's like no chance I could have won this game if they had been able to play that card, but I was just able to like play my Saga, take their creature, take their unbeatable card, and like win the game from there. And those are the sorts of moments where you're like, oh my gosh, like that's the difference between a 5-2 run and a 6-1 run, playing for the finals. And in the final round, my opponent got stuck on 2 lands for a while. I was able to build a giant army to capitalize with my aggression and win before they could draw out of it. I also got to do the Azog play, which like was like taking my buffed creature, killing it with a Zog to get it even a little bit bigger, and that helped me push extra damage because like you get to like leverage your giant bigger creature now, and so that was really helpful as well. But I was able to win the box. It was super satisfying, and absolutely leaning into the aggressive role, deciding not to splash, just taking advantage of what I could do was really, really nice, and overall felt really, really great to start the day. Second run in to my third day to get my 3rd box of the competition. Just like a really satisfying feeling. And overall, like, again, this is why part of the reason why this event felt like such a huge success was because I was like winning a box every few runs, fairly consistently winning boxes. Like my win rate was still really high, and overall I was just feeling pretty amazing about how things were going. Run number 12, I felt like my deck was solid. I felt like I played pretty well overall, but it was one of the runs where I think I could have made a different play and I would have won the game if I had made it. There was like a key block in my final round, and it was one of those ones where they were tapped out. There was nothing they could have had. And instead of just like spending the time to think through it all, I like had the block that made sense to me instinctively. And then I just went with it instead of like double checking. I like mentally clocked that it was a key block, but then I didn't act on that and like double check. Okay, can I make sure that my creatures all survive the way I want them to? And like, I felt pretty bad about it after the fact because I like went through like all of the cards that both players top decked from there on. And I think I would have won if I had been able to keep like one. It was like the difference between keeping like a 5/5 versus keeping 2/3/3. So it wasn't like game breaking in and of itself, but if I had kept the 3/3s, I would have been dealing like 2 more extra points of damage, and that would have like made a big difference because I drew so poorly down the stretch from there, because it was pretty much a pure top deck war after that, but I had like a 5/5 in play or whatever it was, and then they just outdrew me down the stretch. But if I had a couple 3/3s, I think I might have been able to secure the victory there. So it was a really kind of painful loss because like it was one of those ones where looking back on it, I was like, oh my gosh, I should have been able to win this. I should have had all these options, but it wasn't necessarily that big of a mistake, and it just kind of didn't work out. And it was one of those ones that kind of like, okay, you can bounce back from this, you can focus up, and sometimes those games are going to happen where you have to be able to like you have to recognize that you're not always going to play perfectly. Like at this point, I'm still having a really, really good win percentage, but sometimes you just have to accept the fact that sometimes you're not always going to play your best. Sometimes you're going to have to learn from your mistakes. And even though I clocked that it was a key moment in the game, I still made a block that I wasn't really pleased with in retrospect. And still, I went 4-2 in this run, so it wasn't like the end of the world as far as that all of that was concerned. And my first loss just felt like really unlucky. Like my opponent just had like they played like Roads Go Ever On and then sacrificed their giant creature to a Bolg and then just like had like all the removal they needed when they needed it. And it was just like a tough game. But the second loss, I was like, okay, I could have maybe done something about this one. And those ones are the ones that sting a little bit, but you still can bounce back. You still have a 4-2 record. You're still like, okay, we're battling. We've already got a trophy for the day, but we're going to keep doing our best because you never know when opportunity might strike again. Lucky number round 13 came up and I had another blue-black deck, which is really weird to say because like it's not a supported color combo. I'd already had one blue-black deck, but it just felt like where I wanted to be with this pool. My black cards were pretty good. I had a Golem Riddlemaster, which was quite nice. And then I had like in blue, I had like a Thranduil and I had some cards with Recruit, and that felt good enough, giving myself some card velocity, helping me avoid flood out situations, things like that. And overall, the deck just ended up performing really, really well. I had plenty of interactive spells. I had plenty of like early plays. And I had a couple of games where I like made a couple of small mistakes early on. And I lost my third round where maybe if I had equipped my Crude Bent Blade to a different creature, I would have been able to win. But I was also able to just kind of like cruise through some rounds. What happened in this one, though, felt like intervention of some kind. I was 3-1. So I'm like in okay shape, and I accidentally clicked the attack all button. And this was a case where it's like, okay, you're probably not supposed to be playing if you're like clicking through your turn so fast on your full control that you accidentally click the attack all button. But then my opponent made one of the weirdest blocks I'd ever seen, didn't really punish me at all for attacking all, and then conceded the next turn. So instead of being 3-2, feeling like a complete like failure for having accidentally attacked all in a key high stakes tournament, I ended up being 4-1, and I was still live to keep going. And my next round, I actually played brilliantly because I had my list of all the cards I could play around, and my opponent was playing as if they had Sting, which was the rare. And like I played around them having Sting, I played around them having the Boffer Adventure combat trick, and I was able to win that game. So I went from playing like just attacking all for no reason in a very tight game to playing around some combat tricks, doing really well. Next round, I was able to just like punish an opponent for getting stuck on lands, and then in my final round my opponent just like didn't play great cards, and I was able to just like kind of crush them when they were just playing like 1-2 elves and ponies, and I just had like an army with menace that was just like hitting them, and I didn't get frustrated for missing my colors, and I was able to end up emerging victorious. And it was a really, really good run for me to kind of be like, okay, sometimes I'm going to be the one that gets crazy lucky, where like my opponent just like doesn't, like I had just had the run where I felt like I made a missed block, and then I immediately jumped into another run and like I made this all out attack, and I was like, okay, this isn't how you wanted this event to be played out. You wanted to be more focused, you wanted to be doing everything, but I mean at the same time, sometimes you just gotta stay focused and like do your best even when you make these horrible blunders. And I was able to get another box, and this was 2 boxes in like 3 runs, and that was just like insane to me. And I think I called it a day there, and I was like, okay, we've got 2 boxes in one day. That's pretty crazy. I mean, it was just kind of surreal, honestly, especially with the way it went. I had won 2 of my 4 boxes with blue-black, which is also kind of crazy. And so I just called it there, and I was like, okay, we're going to chill for the rest of the day, take some time to focus up so we can play our best the next day. At this point, as I had already said, my goals were to get that 66% win rate. My goals were to win 1 box. And like my goals were completely out of the water to some degree, but I still had this win percentage goal in my head. And because of like my outstanding performance that day, I had 53 wins and 22 losses, which was over a 70% win rate. And I do think that that was a little bit higher because I had run pretty well. I was in a good spot, but I was feeling very, very confident. And that made the next day a little bit more challenging. So 3 days into my tournament, 13 runs in, I had won 4 boxes. But the 4th day was going to be a little bit more challenging. My first deck up, I had kind of like a just green-black deck, and I lost the first round. And it was one of those ones where like it was just slightly close every single time, but they were able to win. And then I was able to win my second round with like Down in the Valley and a Bjorn's Hospitality, which turned out to be a key interaction for a future run, plus Hobbit holes, because I had 3 Hobbit holes. And so I was like, oh my gosh, Bjorn's Hospitality is going to be great in this deck, which it ended up being. And then I was able to just like beat a blue-white deck, beat a black-red deck with the Bjorn's Fetch Land synergy. And then I was able to like play a crazy game where like my nasty little rabbit became like 11 power, which was pretty wild. And then, of course, you lose the game where they go like turn 2, Bejeweled Warg, and then Head of the Hunt, and you don't hit your 3rd land drop, and you're like, okay, well, we still at least went 4-2 here. We still kept our win rate preserved a little bit to some degree, and like you can't win them all, but like this deck felt like it had like a little bit going for it as an aggressive deck, but it was a little bit weak. It was playing some cards I didn't normally want to play, and overall, I felt pretty happy with a 4-2 with this one overall. My next round was another pretty solid one. I like lost the first game to them having like it all. Like they went turn 2 Golem, Riddlemaster, and then they played turn 3 Dane, which are 2 of the best rares in the set. And then I eventually kind of clawed my way back in, and they just wiped the board, dealing 3 to everything. So it was like, okay, I can never win that one pretty much. And then I won 3 in a row before I lost. So it was like, again, 3-2 finish. Not the worst result with a pretty medium deck. And overall, anytime that you're able to like get some number of gems back, you feel all right, especially when your deck isn't like exceptional. You're just kind of going through, playing your cards, hoping for the best. My next run was one of my few O2s. I had the classic like situation where I was deciding whether to splash or not to splash. And in retrospect, I think splashing was correct. But again, I learned my lesson for the future, which will come in handy. But I was like, okay, it's very borderline. Would I rather have consistency, or would I rather have the power of the splash? And I think the power of the splash oftentimes wins through if you have good enough mana. And I think this deck did have some pretty reasonable mana fixing. I wasn't sure whether I wanted to jeopardize my aggressive game plan. And also, I think I was treating Crude Bentblade as more of a removal spell than it was. You want to just be able to play that card out without having it to be like a key kill spell in your deck. And so like I think counting that as interaction was a little bit of a flaw in my plan a little bit. But overall, this is just like one of those ones where like if I had splashed, I might have been able to win a little bit easier potentially, because I did get kind of wrecked game 1 by them just playing Old Fat Spider, which isn't even a great card, but it's great when your opponent doesn't have kill spells for it. And then game 2 I lost because I was like 1 black source short of winning, and unfortunately that happened like in my second round instead of like 5 rounds in, where after I'd gotten a couple wins. But like if I had had an extra black source, I would have been able to win the game, but I didn't, so I lost. And again, 0-2, you have to be able to battle back from those swings in these sorts of events. And this was 16 runs in, so I was already way further ahead of where I thought I was, and so even having a couple of rough runs in a row, it's totally fine. My final round of the day was just not a great deck, I don't think. It felt pretty consistent, but nothing like overwhelmingly powerful was going on. And like in my first round, like the only note I had was they played similar cards to me, but somehow theirs felt like they did a lot more. And it just overall felt like a very medium deck. I had like okay cards. I went 1-2, and after going 0-2 into 1-2, I called it a day. I was still 4 days in with 4 boxes, and so I was kind of like feeling like, okay, I got a little bit over expectation yesterday. I'm going back a little bit more towards earth on this day. My win rate had definitely leveled off quite a bit from its peak of when I had won 2 boxes in 3 runs, but I was still feeling like I could definitely leverage some like keep my mental focus and keep playing and like just focus up battle back the next day. And for those curious, after my 17 runs, I had a 61-30 win rate, and so I was still just above my 66% goal at 67%. And I was trying to be like focused on like just playing my best every round, but it was the sort of thing where I would check it every like at the end of every day to be like, okay, am I still like playing at a decent level? Is my goal still in reach? And obviously, when you like have like a couple of really good runs and then it goes down, you're like, okay, well, it's going down over time, so maybe I've like started to play worse or something. But sometimes it just levels out, and it like the more matches you play, the more closely it goes towards that level value. So that's how that goes. One other thing that I did at this point, I'd had a couple of rough runs in a row, and instead of just jamming more runs, I took the time and I just did a little bit of a summary sheet over my past like 7 runs, like my runs 10 through 17, and I just tried to make a list of all the causes of my wins and all of the causes of my loss. So for an example of a cause of my win, I had bad opponent deck, which was like maybe not the most helpful, but it was the sort of thing like, okay, how many games am I winning just because it feels like my opponent is not building their deck correctly? I had early pressure snowball. I had like great synergy for my deck, like outvalued opponent, because I was trying to get a sense of, am I winning more games in the late game or more games in the early game? I had like curve out plus rares. I had like a bunch of like, I eventually tried to synthesize them down to like early wins, late wins, and then like bad opponent, like my opponent making a misplay or something like that. And then my losses, I had a similar thing, like stumbles, late losses, bad plays. They had it all. Those were the 4 categories I kind of eventually settled on. And it was just an attempt to kind of get a sense of, am I building my decks too aggressively? Am I building my decks too much for the early game where I'm losing a lot of like games for the late game? Because I was trying to see, am I losing like every time the game goes late? Am I winning every time the game goes late? And it was just more kind of like a exercise in, sometimes when you're playing these events, there's an instinct to just like, okay, I'll do the next one, I'll play better the next one. But if you just spend some time thinking about, okay, how am I actually winning? How am I actually losing? I felt like it was a good way to refocus, especially because it was spending time productively, it felt like in my head, without just playing more runs when I maybe wasn't playing my best, or maybe my mindset wasn't at its best to play optimally. So I had a few runs that didn't go my way, but that day I didn't win any boxes. But one thing that I did take slight solace in was that I had seen other really good players playing in this event and also have long stretches where they didn't win anything. And not that 4 runs in a row was a long stretch by any means, but I had seen people have very long runs. And so I was like, okay, I'm already batting kind of above average potentially in terms of like converting my win rate into actual boxes. And so it was helping me stay calm. And I had my secondary goals of win rate. And then I had my like nice easygoing plan of, okay, I'm just going to spend $100 of entry fees a day, generally speaking, and end up going from that perspective. And so I was 17 runs in, and I was feeling really, really good having won 4 boxes. And overall, I mean, I feel like that's just like got to be something that you're pretty happy with if you're able to win so many boxes in that many runs. But the next day it continued and I kept on battling. Day 5, I'm 17 runs in, and this ended up being the day I played the most runs. I played 7 runs on day 5. The first one was at like 4 a.m. because I had driven my brother to the airport, and then like I was kind of jet lagged from my own trip, and so I just like played a run, went 5-2. My deck had some sweet things going on. I played like Misty Mountains Cold into Unexpected Party multiple times, which was pretty sweet. But overall, just a solid deck. You lose some games, and like that was just how it went. It did definitely feel like the sort of deck that could have gone the distance, but that is how it goes. My next run did not go very well. I went 1-2. Just like I felt like it was like a really tricky build, and I like wanted to build like a multicolored value deck. So I had like the weirdest mana base I'd had of like the entire run, because I felt like I could like leverage like Mirkwood Nurturer really effectively to like outvalue my opponents. And in game 1, it kind of worked out. Like I got a lot of value, and then game 2, I just like flooded out really badly despite having like Thror's Map, which happens sometimes. And like game 3, they ran me over. So I kind of like lost on both ends of things, but I don't think it was like that hard. Like I don't think I built my pool wrong. It was just kind of a little bit weak, and I was stretching to get power level, and that's how it goes sometimes. My next round, I feel like, was one of the few times where I rushed my build. Normally, I spent a really long time on the build process, and this one I was just like, okay, this build seems pretty straightforward. But then after the fact, there was like, okay, I could have considered playing my green cards, and I felt like a little bit bad about how I did that. But then again, my deck did perform okay. I went 2-2. My losses were like my opponent played Lonely Mountain, which turned out to be a pretty good mirror breaker card for like red-black mirrors, because they just forced the one player to play aggressively because the other player kind of had inevitability in the red-black matchup, because that was just such a good value engine for the late game, especially because so many equipments were kind of viable. And so whenever your opponent played Lonely Mountain, you kind of felt like you had to be aggressive, and if you couldn't, then that was just kind of rough. And then I had like the classic where you just like don't hit your like double, like your second swamp to cast your like double black cards, and then you just can't kill their like Chief Warg's Company when they play it, and then you're like, oh man, like I thought this would work out, but it just didn't work out particularly well, and so you lose those sorts of games sometimes. At this point, I was at a natural reflection point in the event. I was 20 runs deep. It feels like every 10 runs, you kind of want to take stock on how things are going. I had gone 7 runs in a row without a box. In my last 5 runs, I was 9-10. My win percentage overall was still 65.7%, but I was below that 66% mark that I really wanted. And so I was at that classic point where it's like, okay, time to focus up. Keep your spirits up. Things are either maybe are reverting back to a mean, and maybe you'll learn more about yourself and your own ability, or maybe things are just around the corner that are going to help you kind of bounce back on your spirits. And of course, when my spirits were low is when I decided to take another attempt at recording with audio, because the event was really fun for me. It was going really well for me. I had won 4 boxes in 20 runs, which is still a really good ratio of boxes. My win percentage was pretty good. I was still feeling pretty happy overall, even though my last few runs hadn't been the best. And so I decided to make a video, and I just was like, okay, I'm going to sacrifice some win percentage because I might not be quite as focused, but I'm going to make a video of this run. And so you can actually watch my entire 21st run on YouTube in its entirety, where I just like go through all of my thought process, pick by pick, build by build, as I build my little thing. And it was a very interesting build, because I think it was literally the first deck that I had that did not play either black or red. It's such a unique spot to find yourself in, where your best options are not black or red, but I had a really cool blue-green deck splashing white, and it was actually able to get the job done. And you can watch the entire run, my entire thoughts on the build process, but it was able to get the job done, and I actually won my first 4 in a row. I then like lost a close one, and then I was able to win my last 3, and it was just really, really satisfying to get a box after such a long drought. Bang! I was trying to play around Warg Tactics. Oh my gosh, we got the box. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go! Yes! Oh my gosh. Oh, baby, let's go! Ah, feels amazing. Oh my gosh, I'm so happy. Oh, this deck is so sweet. And it's such a sick deck to win it with, too. Oh my gosh, down in the valley. Nobody was ready for this one. Yes! Oh, bang! Oh, I'm just so happy. I mean, oh my gosh, what a thrill. What an absolute thrill. Anyway, just, whew, that rocked. And to reestablish myself at the 66% win rate, and just like, it was almost my most satisfying one, partly because I got to share it with everyone who I was recording the video with, and partly because it was just really nice to have a win after so long. And obviously some people play like 10 events and they don't win a single box. So like, obviously that's how it goes sometimes. But it also was like a nice moment for me to think about, what if this had happened at the start of the event and I would have missed out on the entire glory of the event? Because now I was 20 runs in with 5 boxes and I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. But I almost, like, if this had happened at the start of the event where I go 7 runs in a row, I was only going to play my 6 runs or whatever. So if I'd had that really rough time, my entire experience of the event would have been very different. But I got the win. I got a trophy. I battled back. It was such a satisfying feeling. And I was now at like, okay, I've got my 5 boxes in 5 days. Let's go. This is pretty satisfying, especially because it took me a few tries even on this day. It was my 4th run of the day. And that was really, really satisfying. And then I move on to my next run, which was another very solid deck. It was black-green this time, splashing for white. And this was, sadly, my second 6-win run of the event. I was generally pretty good at converting those final ones because generally when I get to that point, I have a very good deck. But I ended up being like, I lost my second round where they got off to a quick start against me. And then I rattled off 5 wins in a row to be like 6-1. And then in the final game, it was like a game of inches where like I was on the back foot the whole time. My opponent wasn't playing perfectly though to capitalize on this, and so I was able to keep myself alive. I had like I had my Chief Wargs company out. They had a gigantic big bear that I had a chump blocker for every turn because of my Chief Wargs company. Eventually I was able to get the big bear off the battlefield, like the giant 10/7 hexproof one. And then they found a kill spell for my Chief Wargs company on like a turn where I was maybe about to stabilize, and it was just like, oh, that's a really tough way to lose. But I think I played really well, and going 7-1 into 6-2 was really good for my spirits, and also really good for my, like, in terms of my like win rate, trying to get back to that 66%. I was definitely above that 66% mark after those 2 runs, and that was a really good feeling. And then, of course, I was feeling pretty good because I had just had some really good runs in a row, and I immediately had like the classic like O2 build a black-red deck. Just like it doesn't really work very well because you draw kind of badly, and like you don't draw that many spells and you just lose. So you go from the classic 7-1, 6-2 into an O2, and then I had like one final run for the day where I didn't really have like any crazy powerful rares, but I just had like 4 Gandalf Spark starters, and I decided I would just play all 4 and hope that that power level could kind of carry me. I did have an Azog Moria's Ruin, but I was generally just like, okay, maybe these Gandalfs can carry me. And for a couple of games they did. Like I won a couple of rounds, then I lost one where they just like, I don't think I played my best. Like they got me with a long-bodied gray dog when I attacked with a 1/1. Not that that was really the outcome. And then I was able to like stabilize and take over a game with Lonely Mountain. I forgot I had that card when I first mentioned the deck, but yeah, Lonely Mountain, very good card. And then like I knew they had like a Pinecone Strike in their hand in my last game, and instead of just playing into it, I just like tried to play around it, and I think that kind of punished me to some degree. But like because I had a Dory in place, I was trying to make it so they couldn't kill my creature and kill my treasure token or something like that. Or I had a Dory in my hand. But overall, I think I should have just played into it. The deck didn't really feel special, so going 3-2 to end the day, but still a successful day. And I did feel like bouncing back a little bit after my O2, going 3-2. Mentally calm. I feel really good going into the next day of the competition. So we're at day 6 of the event. I'm 85-43 in my games, which is a 66.4% win rate, which is right above where I was hoping to be. I've won 5 boxes. I'm feeling really good about myself. And my 25th run of the event starts off really badly. It's just like my pool is really weak to the point where I'm just trying to cheese people out with combat tricks. It obviously doesn't work great. I go 1-2. I don't feel great about myself. My next run, though, I feel really good when I open my pool because I have Feely the Pathfinder and the Arkenstone. So it's almost like I have a second copy of Feely in my deck. I feel like my deck has like decent removal, interaction, kind of that sort of shenanigans going on. And I end up going 0-2, where I just get like wrecked by Crude Bent Blade. My opponent has like a rabbit that just grows and it just doesn't go very well. And then game 2, I lose to like Great Fierce Bee, where they like use Vow of Erebor on it, which is like the only time my opponent has cast Vow of Erebor against me like the entire time. And like it's like a random combat trick that's not even particularly great. And I felt like I maybe could have won the game if I had taken some extra time, done some extra math, and starting off the day 1-4 is a really bad feeling. You're just like, oh my gosh. I felt like I like the first deck, I was like, okay, this deck isn't very good. But the second deck, I felt really bad. I was like, oh my gosh, I've really botched this. And when you go 1-4, when you're just above your win percentage target, your win percentage threshold, you're just like, oh my gosh, this is really not where I want to be. I've now gone below my 66%. And I end up in my next run, my 27th run, because of the way the event worked, if they ran out of boxes, they were going to close the event. And so this ended up being my final run of the event. And so I'm going to let some of the drama unfold for you as I explain it. So going into run 27, my final run, I am 86 out of 133. So I'm 86 and 47 or something like that at this point. So I have a 64.66% win rate, which is below where I wanted to be. That was my goal for the event, was to get to 66%. And regardless of how many trophies I've won, I still want to reach all my goals, especially because it means that I'm like playing at a good level throughout the event instead of just like playing really well for a couple of events, playing really badly for the others. So I really want to do well. I do not know at the time that this is going to be my final run, but it turns out the only way for me to get to my 66% win rate is for me to get a perfect undefeated run 7-0 with this build. And I end up with a deck that feels pretty solid. I end up, based on my previous learnings, splashing white for Celebrate the Mountain King, because I learned from that previous run that, hey, this extra interaction is pretty valuable, and I don't mind the little bit of a knock to my mana base. I have a Dwalin Weapon Master as one of my only rares in this entire build. I also have just like a pretty classic like black-red deck here, nothing too crazy. 2 Night Howl Pursuers really let me ramp up the aggression. I have a Bothersome Noisemaker, but like looking at this deck, nothing looks too crazy because I just don't have any crazy high rare cards. But the real decision point came with whether to splash white. I decided to splash white, and I actually had an extra tap land that I could have played. I could have played, I think, a second copy of Hobbit Hole, but because I had no halflings to go search up, and because I didn't want to play too many tap lands and I only had the 1 white card, I elected to play just a single Hobbit Hole, which I thought was pretty interesting for me because normally in a lot of formats I would just play all of my tap lands because why not? And then the first game with this deck, I ended up having it felt like one of the luckiest games I could have possibly had, but it was really because I got so unlucky and my opponent got even less lucky because I flooded out incredibly badly in this game. I was just drawing like land after land after land, and my opponent was drawing spell after spell after spell, but they couldn't cast them because they were horrifically like stuck on lands. And it ended up being one of the few cases where Mana Flood beats Mana Screw because my opponent just never drew out of it. And that game was the turning point because I had already gone 1-4 on the day. It was not going well. And I was like, man, I have a solid deck and I'm just never going to draw a spell and I'm going to lose. And instead, I was able to turn that around, win that game, and then rattle off a few more wins. My second round opponent, they didn't do anything too crazy. They played like down to Goblin Town, but a couple of them. But I was able to move past it, get my glowing going, get a bunch of mana going. Next round, my opponent like didn't have removal, and so I was just able to get an uncontested Bothersome Noisemaker, get a smooth victory, and being aggressive with my deck ended up working out very well. Round 4, I played another black-red mirror match, of course, and I'm just drawing good mixes of spells and lands. My opponents aren't playing cards that are too scary. That's the note that I wrote. Things are going pretty well. Round 5, my opponent plays Lonely Mountain, which is kind of the mirror breaker. I was like, oh man, I have to be aggressive here, but I drew both my Night Howl Pursuers. They were awesome. My Dwalin was able to buff my Ragged Short Spear to make it able to equip to a Night Howl Pursuer to let it get to 4 power so that it could swing for 6 damage on its own, which was an absolutely essential part of that card. And I couldn't cast the Celebrate the Mountain King off my splash, which I noted to myself, like, okay, should I be splashing? But it ended up working out well anyway. And then in the next round, I drew a kill spell at the perfect moment to kill a Thranduil. My Night Howl Pursuer was able to aggressively end the game, and I was 6-0. My tap lands did cost me a little bit, going Pursuer into Prowler, because I wanted to be able to curve that out, but I couldn't. But my Desolation Prowler, that is. But I was still able to win. And then in the final game, I had a very hard-fought battle. Dwalins, they had one, I had one. They were fighting it out, and I was able to barely emerge victorious. Top decking the Celebrate the Mountain King felt like pure justice to get the win. if I'd drawn a swamp, I would have been able to cast my other kill spell, but it was just like so glorious. I had an aggressive like curve with my Desolation Prowler, so I was like paying 2 life to deal 2 damage to them, and it ended up doing tons of damage to both players, and I was able to win the game. And so felt really good to get a 7-0, my first 7-0 of the whole event. And because I was able to get that 7-0 run, because I was able to finish things off with some style there, I was able to have a final of 93 out of 140. Which was just enough for a 66.4% win rate. I got my 6th trophy out of 27 tries, which was a really, really good result as well. I learned over the course of the event, I think splashing to celebrate the Mountain King was correct there. And if I had lost that first game, it would have tanked my whole run. I did the math. If I had 1 loss in this run, I would have had a slightly below 66% win rate. I would have been 93 out of 141. I would have been 65.95%. But because I was able to do that, I was able to get that exact win percentage that I wanted. I was able to get the 6th box, and then the event closed like before I even started another run. I didn't know the event was going to close, but ending on that victory that kind of wrapped it all together, got me that 6th box, got me everything gloriously. Oh my gosh, it was just such a satisfying event. It was such a thrill. It was such a good time, and it was so nice to be kind of recording, but not recording at the same time, because I was able to kind of make this video, and I knew I was going to make this video, but I didn't have the pressure of like talking through all of my plays all of the time. And I felt really good about how I optimized everything. And I'm so excited to be able to share all of my runs, all of my kind of sharing the glory with all of you folks, and let you know how it all went, because it's great. It was great when I did post my run to hear people cheering me on and all of that stuff. So yeah, that's how my Arena Direct went. That's how I kind of accidentally won a bunch of boxes. I was initially going to like pay $200 in entry fees. I ended up buying, I think, $700 worth of gems. But the way it ended up working out was I didn't get to spend all of the last amount that I had got on runs, because you get 20,000 gems whenever it's like 20,000 gems for $100. I had my initial $200 buy-in that I was going to do, and then I did that 5 more times, but I ended up with 12,000 gems, which is like, let's say $60 worth or whatever, because just the way the math works out on that. But I started with 8,000 gems. So the way I'm kind of calculating it is I spent $700 and I ended up with plus $20 worth of gems. So it was roughly 680 gems to win 6 boxes. I had my 66% win rate. I played 27 runs, and I had a 93 out of 140. So 93 and 47 was my overall win percentage, which I was quite pleased with. I hit my goals on that front, and I feel like winning 6 boxes is really, it was a really good experience for me, and I was really happy I was able to do it. And I don't think I would have necessarily even tried if I didn't have the incentive of being able to make a cool video for all of you. So thank you so much, everybody, for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this kind of recap style video. And thanks for everything, and just being a great community and all of that good stuff. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you made it to the end, leave #HugeWin in the comment section down below, and I'll talk to you next time.